All right. Hey everyone. Welcome to my at-home studio. I have nothing better to do on a Tuesday night than to give a quick recap of the case study paper, just in case people are still confused. I'm still getting emails. Don't mind the box of vases in the back. So let's go ahead and sort of talk about this case study paper, and you can see me on the big screen, hey, and then me on the small screen. So the case study paper is what I think to be relatively straightforward, okay? And some of the major concerns that people have is regarding what the analysis should look like and what the recommendations should look like. I think the recommendations are where people start getting thrown for a loop. But keep in mind, the recommendations section is 10 of your 25 points, okay? So really the purpose of the case study paper is to identify and isolate 3 to 5 concepts. Again, with any type of media, with any type of example, we could identify seemingly endless concepts, right? For our purposes, I want you to find the 3 most prominent concepts, okay? And then with that, with those concepts, explain where they're present, where we see them or hear them, why they're significant, and then the recommendations. How can we use those concepts moving forward to maybe improve on a circumstance? So I pulled a random wedding photo that we'll use for my little sample case study. And here it is. This is a photo from my wedding. Let's zoom in a little bit. It is out of context what? Okay, so that's half the battle, right? Out of context, we see me and my groomsmen and other people at the wedding freaking out. Within this, we see one individual in particular that I happen to be approaching that everyone is looking at with looks of shock, okay? So this is me, the groom. This is my best friend, who I happen to be, instead of tossing the garter to everyone, I happen to be fake tossing and walking up to him and giving it to him. Him and his girlfriend, again, adding contextual cues to it, have been dating for a while. They are sort of the next up to get married, and so I thought I would expedite that process. It actually came to me sort of spur of the moment. Okay, so now we have a context to it. So how do we apply this particular image to the case study paper? Well, it's easy for us to look at the nonverbal cues because we see a lot of them. And I went ahead and I just jotted down some 3 concepts that I think are most prevalent within this. So starting from the very top, if this is the media, this is the example that I'm going to use, I should probably start with an attention-getting device that has some sort of correspondence to what we're talking about. For instance, attention-getting device to the effect of, have you ever looked at a still picture and wondered, what in the world is going on? Weird. I should probably unbold this, by the way. The orientation is something to the effect of, there are a variety of nonverbal cues that are present in still pictures that might be hyphenated. A benefit of exploring these types of media, it's actually medium, through communication concepts, is that we are able to shed light on otherwise confusing cues. Okay, so the attention getter, I'm trying to capture your attention, the orientation, connecting the big picture of what this particular image is, what I'm talking about in the case study, and then what the communication elements are, right? This is a communication-based course. We start talking about the communication elements and the thesis statement. Within this paper, I will analyze a still picture from a wedding that highlights 3 communication concepts: bold, immediacy, affect displays, and oculesics. After providing that analysis, I will go into detail as to using these concepts in your everyday life through a series of recommendations, okay? So the recommendations, for my purposes, and we can frame these recommendations in a variety of ways. If you're talking about a breakup, Maybe you can use those nonverbal cues or the verbal cues, whatever the communication concepts are. You can use those cues as recommendations. So we were in a fight. This person used a high volume. That's the analysis. This is why it's important. The recommendations would be, okay, in order to avoid fights in the future, you should use less of or a decreased volume when talking as to not make someone feel as though you're upset. So I'm going to essentially do the same thing with this paper. Instead, I'm going to talk about the importance of these three concepts, the immediacy, the affect displays, and the oculesics. I'm going to define those, and I'm going to show where they are present and why they're important. And then for the recommendation section, which again, 10 of the 25 points, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about why or how I can use these particular nonverbal cues in my everyday life. So recommendations as to how to use these effectively. I'll stress the importance of them in the analysis, and then I'll talk about the recommendations, what can be done in the future. And if you heard that beep, that is one of you inevitably emailing me. Analysis. Sort of the foundation. What are the purpose of nonverbal cues is to set the stage for understanding a message. Messages are symbolic, especially when it comes to lacking verbal communication. And we can go on orienting us. Pictures provide insights that otherwise are not present. And we could set up the foundation a little bit more, but that sort of gets the ball rolling that we're going to be analyzing a picture, right? And so we might even want to say that the picture for the purpose of the case study assignment is enclosed below. See reference page. I mean, realistically, this would be an appendix if we're talking about APA. Let me drink from my Chicago Bulls cup. It would be a different attachment page. So there we go. I have some sort of foundation. I'm referencing this picture. As I'm reading this, I go, okay, they have a picture included or they have a video clip. I know where to get that. And you'll get that in the reference page. You'll give me the YouTube link. You'll give me the picture. You'll give me maybe a breakdown of the interaction that you've had. Concepts. The first concept highlighted in this picture is the idea of immediacy. Okay? And then I can just scroll down here. Immediacy is the idea of closeness shared between people, O'Hare et al. Period, comma, 2015, comma, page XX, end. Immediacy is important because why? Why is it that there is immediacy? And more importantly, since this is a picture, how do we see immediacy? So immediacy is important because it outwardly is displayed between people, making it easier to distinguish the relationships given the lack of other cues. Okay, so the argument is that with these nonverbal cues, since it's a picture, I don't get to see them horsing around with each other. I don't get to see them holding hands, whatever the situation might be. So if the immediacy, if I can gather that immediacy from this picture, that's super helpful. Additionally, so this is sort of the next point driving it home. Additionally, immediacy allows for us to gather more information about the individuals. In fact, a lack of immediacy might lead to misunderstanding within the photograph. The image displays different individuals closely touching one another. That sounds inappropriate. Touching one another, or I guess maybe probably close proximity. And we can talk about proxemics, which explains, or which maybe portrays to the viewer that there is an already pre-existing relationship And I could maybe drive this point home a little bit further, okay? And then, you know, similar, let's get rid of the bold, similar to the idea of immediacy, the photo also demonstrates affect displays, which are defined as so on and so forth. We see these affect displays with the variety of poses that the individuals make. There is a look of shock on the individual to the far left, confusion for the one next to the recipients, and frustration, or whatever it is that you want to attribute it, to the individual on the right. Go into detail, follow the same path of immediacy. What's the definition of it? Where do we see it in the picture, and why is it important? We do the same thing then with oculesics, study of eye contact, page, XX, whatever it is, so on and so forth, and rinse and repeat. At the end of that last paragraph, you'll say something to the effect of, now that I have provided an analysis, I would like to move on to recommendations for future picture viewing to properly understand photos and the nonverbal cues within, which is sort of a run-on sentence, poorly constructed, but the general sentiment's the same. Excuse me. Recommendations. They work just like the analysis, just a little bit past it. So as we talk about the recommendations, it's sort of the same type of format. We would, in the best case scenario, simply use the analysis concepts again in the recommendations. Now I say 3 to 5 because you might use 3 concepts within the analysis and 2 completely different concepts within the recommendations. You can totally do that. I just generally recommend, if you've already introduced immediacy, you've given us the analysis on it, you might as well use that foundation for the recommendations. And that's what I'm going to do in this example. So within these recommendations, I will say, while viewing photographs, looking at immediacy is quite important. And then I'll go into describing and explaining why it's important. So you at home watching this video, hopefully people are watching it up until this point, why would it be important to have some immediacy or to be able to look out for immediacy? Well, as alluded to above, viewers can start to discern different relationships within the image, which allows for more situational and relational cues to emerge. And this could be an example of, heck, we could use situational and relational clues. We talked about situational and relational context. We could use those right here, and that would satisfy our 4th and 5th concept. But for our purposes, let's just sort of focus on the immediacy. Okay? So looking at immediacy is quite important. It gives us more context. It gives us the relational context and also the situational context. Similarly, examining immediacy allows for whatever X, Y, and Z. The recommendation, in order to improve our accuracy while examining, I use examining way too many times. In order to improve our accuracy while examining immediacy, we should look out for 1, 2, and 3. We should look out for these 3 key features, such as facial expression, oculesics, which could be a nice transition. There's only supposed to be 1 C in there. Oculesics, and then we could even say, and affect displays. So we can integrate these recommendations together. And as we do that, specific understanding of affect displays provide us with unique dialogue within an image. Shocked faces, for example, allude to insert generic comments, whereas solemn faces might suggest other thing. Okay, so again, it's very formulaic. You're introducing a concept within the recommendations, and you're providing recommendations as to how to use this more effectively. A recommendation with this would be, unfortunately, the understanding of affect displays may be culturally bound. For instance, smiling and looking into a camera is a very westernized behavior. In certain Asian cultures, individuals will act modestly and cover their faces. If we were to interpret these behaviors, i.e., well, actually this would be e.g. covering their face from a Western perspective, we would attribute that behavior as embarrassed. However, we know that is not the case. As a result, we must be conscious of cultural cues when examining affect displays. Okay, so you're giving us some insight. You're giving us some idea as to what these cues are that we're observing, how it is that we can use them, and what recommendations we need moving forward. Okay, and again, why they matter, all of these should sort of be sufficed. And as we go on to the conclusion, we sort of wrap up the situation. So wrapping up, pictures can tell 1,000 words or 3 nonverbal cues. That might be that's probably a better memorable close. We'll just keep it there. Picture can tell 1,000 words or 3 nonverbal cues, depending on the contextual clues we are privy to. Wow, what a great sentence. Okay, the recap of the situation will be, pictures are not always accurate in our representation. The main priority within this context is to make sense of the individuals, which, as we talk about it from a photographer standpoint, is the subject, but that seems a little bit offensive. The main priority within this context is to make sense of the individuals photographed and provide a series of recommendations. The present case study paper provided 3 communication concepts, X, Y, and Z, as well as a series of recommendations to utilize these concepts more accurately moving forward. Ultimately, the context clues and individual biases highly impact these behaviors or these interpretations. Therefore, each photograph analyzed must be done through an objective lens. Pictures can tell 1,000 words or 3 nonverbal cues, depending on the contextual clues we are privy to. And we're done, okay? Obviously, we fill in the blank with some of these analyses. We talk about these affect displays. We talk about oculesics. We provide examples. We explain why they're important. But ultimately, as I go back to the face, ultimately, this all should make sense to you, and it should make sense to me. What I would do if I was you is I would find someone, maybe a roommate, a parent, a significant other, and have them read through your paper. Because when I read through the paper, I understand the concepts because I teach them. You understand the concepts because you've learned them and you've selected them. But maybe someone else who's a third person doesn't understand when you talk about affect displays. They go, you explained it in the first sentence, but I didn't really get a good sense of what that meant. So I would go ahead and find someone else. We have the Writing Center, although you might be a little bit pressed for time. We can open until like 7 o'clock during the weekday. Hopefully this was helpful for you. If it wasn't, I apologize. You can email me like many of you have, many of you will. Other than that, we'll bring this up on Thursday. Until then, have a good one. Breathe, relax. We'll get it done.